I think of Proverbs 14:1. The wisest of women builds her house, but folly with her own hands tears it down. Women have so much power to make it a great home and atmosphere. And then in the opposite side, we also have a place to where our husbands do not enjoy being home and it's miserable for everyone and serves no one. I mean, Christians should have the happiest marriages, right?
Welcome to the Simplified Organization Podcast, 15-minute conversations with real moms about managing our homes and family life cheerfully to the glory of God. We can actually enjoy housework and love being homemakers when we focus on truth and work with gratitude. I'm Mystie Winckler, author of the book Simplified Organization, Learn to Love What Must Be Done, and I run Convivial Circle, an online community helping women to excel at homemaking and do life cheerfully. And one thing that I don't talk a lot about on my blog or podcast is marriage. But marriage is the cornerstone of the homes that we are building. We wouldn't be homemakers or mothers without our husbands. And a happy marriage is a huge part of a happy home. I'm bringing on the whole Simply Convivial team. Myself, Stephanie Mons, our community manager, Lisa Moulton, our operations manager, and Abby Wall, our strategist and mentor member. My husband and I have been married for 23 years. We have 5 kids with 2 sons launched and 3 still left at home. Stephanie has also been married for 23 years. She has a 19-year-old, 16-year-old, and 14-year-old. Abby has been married for 21 years and has 5 teenagers, all living at home. And Lisa has been married for 18 years with a 13-year-old, 11-year-old, and 6-year-old. We're basing our marriage discussion off of Laura Doyle's book, The Empowered Wife. Stephanie brought this book into our community and has run book clubs several times about this book, and we have seen such fruit happening in our community and separately. I've read it twice now, and so I hope our conversations about being good and happy wives are thought-provoking and a blessing to you. Well, I first heard about this book, The Empowered Wife, from Stephanie. I think Stephanie might have already been teaching it inside of Convivial Circle before I heard about it. And so I was like, oh, maybe I should read that book. And I loved it so much. It was so funny to me. It's not a Christian book, but I feel like she was more blunt and specific with things like what respect looks like and what femininity looks like than Christian books on marriage that I had read. So I found it super helpful. And, the title is kind of like The Empowered Wife. Oh man, what kind of feminist garbage is this going to be? But it was not at all. And it's really about taking responsibility for yourself and not needing approval or not being dependent on other people, how they are responding to you, that they're doing what you want. It's about relinquishing control of others, which we as women really need practice in doing, especially with our husbands. And so she's just great about having examples that are real life examples about really stopping excuse making and complaining and embracing being a woman, and not just a woman, but embracing a woman who's married to a man. I like letting men be men and really enjoying being a woman. So I think that's kind of the empowered part. And she also says that women are the keepers of relationships. We are the connection makers in the family network, community network. And so when we know what we're about and when we are doing what we are supposed to do without worrying about what other people are supposed to do, we can really help our marriages be strong and satisfying. She has 6 skills, and she calls them intimacy skills that foster connection, intimacy with your husband in, several ways. And, it's not a femininity that is necessarily frilly or flowery. It's not like, okay, wear skirts all the time. It's really about what does it mean to be a woman, like biologically and culturally as well, being nurturing, fostering relationships, making connections, being receptive, being grateful, and building our homes. I'd love to hear takeaways from you all. You've all worked through this book several times, and I'd love to hear about some of your thoughts about what it means to embrace being a woman, being feminine, and practicing some of these things about giving up excuse making, martyrdom, and really just enjoying your life regardless of how other people respond to you. Stephanie, you want to start?
When I think about the book and talking about like femininity and being a woman, I think about how femininity doesn't have to be about doing everything, right? Which we often associate with like having a career and doing it all. But even for stay-at-home moms, it still can be I'm going to be a strong woman, do everything. If I just, can write the correct list or put my attitude in the right way, or just like line up everything perfectly, then I can do it all, right? And that part of being a homemaker and a wife is pleasing everybody, making sure everybody's taken care of and everybody's happy, but that we forget our own happiness, right? Why do the kids get to always choose something fun to do, or why do our husbands always get to choose something fun to do, and suddenly it's like I've like lost that part of myself. And I think it's something women really do. It's very common, especially like when you start having kids. Like obviously the baby needs you all the time, so you do shelve some of your own thoughts and desires. But that part of being a woman is, like you were saying, like bringing in that relationship, which you talk about a lot within your courses, like especially with your kids, right? Like we're the atmosphere of the home with our kids, with homeschooling, right? But it's the same with our husbands, that we are the keepers of the atmosphere of our relationship with our husbands. So when we bring more of that cheerfulness, that lightheartedness, and our husbands know that we are pleasable and ready to receive their affections and their help and their gifts, whatever they might be, like one of the examples she talks about, in the book, like, raise your hand if you've ever received a head scratching gift. Like, why on earth did he get me the juicer or the vacuum, right? Like, my husband really wanted to get me just a little Swiss Army knife thing. And I had been practicing the skills, and I was like, oh, okay, and he's like, pick out the color. I'm like, okay, well, I'll do that pink one. It was a joyful thing to be able to receive that little pocket knife, which I mostly use as a scissor in my purse. But, it could come in handy for other things. I think maybe I've used the tweezer once or twice, but to bring that like soft place to land for our husbands, right? We don't have to be hard workers in the same way that they are. We can be the soft side of the relationship.
Yeah, that reminds me of kind of it's a way of thinking about the only kind of control you're supposed to have is self-control, where if we're talking about being happy and pleasing people, we think that we have to make sure everyone else is pleased and happy. And that's controlling people that we don't actually have control over, while we're ignoring the self-control part of, well, are you even able to, while you're trying to please others, are other people even able to please you? Like, ooh.
Yeah, when I read this book after Stephanie had recommended it, I just started reading it and I thought, oh, I really wish my mom would have had this book. I grew up in a pretty rough, like my childhood was a little bit more difficult. My parents divorced when I was 17 and there's a lot of issues. And I just thought of all of the ways that, my mom felt the need to have stepped up and controlled everything and just gone about this way. And it really just, there was a lot of issues. So I can't put myself in her, but I think like if she would have had some of these skills, I think even if things ended the way they did, she would have been a lot happier, right? Because, you know, it's just so hard. And I read a lot of Christian like marriage books coming into marriage because I had no idea what a healthy marriage looked like. My family of origin is just not Christians. The word submit was a completely foreign concept to me. I had no idea. None of my family members, went to church and things like that. So like I had to come up with like these new things. And there's a lot of really bad advice in Christian marriage books. I mean, I cannot tell you. And oftentimes the thing is it's both people in the relationship have to read that book. And while we read some of those books that were helpful, like maybe in premarital counseling, my husband was not going to sit down and, do these things. And it was like demanding of, and what I love about this book is that her main purpose for talking to women about this is to end worldwide divorce, which I think is such an important message, an important goal. Like I'm on board with that. And then the other thing is that you do not have to have your husband's conscious effort to do this. Like it's all on you to take responsibility. And these are all things that are actually within your control. And to me, that was so helpful because I could do this in secret, which I actually much more appreciate. Like, I don't have to tell my husband, well, this is how we need to talk about things. Like, I could stop telling him what to do because that doesn't work anyway. And I just really found it so encouraging. And I thought, well, if it could have helped my mom, then it definitely could help me. And I want to stay married for a really long time. And we're on the downhill slide of, kids are starting to launch and I don't have very many years. And I don't want to be one of those couples who like, I mean, not that we're Christians, but right, like that divorce as soon as everybody's out of the house. Like that's so messed up. But we have to cultivate those strong relationship ties throughout child rearing and all those things because we're in this for the long haul and we might as well make it better than ever. And so it was very hopeful too that it could just get better every year. And it's good. Like it has been good. Not even, there's nothing, but it just is like, oh, I could just tweak some things and it could just be so much better. And that was just such an encouraging thing because it wasn't like some marriage books are like, well, you just have to kind of grin and bear it. And then eventually or you have to change yourself to do basically it's doormat policy. It was like, well, that can't be quite right. Like, so I found it just very hopeful.
Yeah, one of the thoughts I had while I reread it for this book club meeting was of, Titus 2, where it says older women are to teach the younger women. And so it's woman to woman, not like woman to married couple, but woman to woman. And one of the things that they're supposed to teach is how to love husbands, which presupposes that, we might actually have to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
It's not just a feeling, right? It's actually something that requires ongoing instruction and work.
Yeah. So when we started this in the book club Inside Circle, I wasn't going to read it, but I loved all the comments that started coming up. And I'm like, okay, I have to listen to this book. And so like, I really was not going to read it. I'm like, I don't need it. I'm fine. I have a good marriage. We're great. It totally changed the game. And I loved it because its whole premise is you are accountable for your actions and you're accountable for how you behave and how you treat yourself. And, you have to be proactive in how you view things and take things and do things. And I love the self accountability. It wasn't putting it on him. It's his fault. It was, what can you do to improve things? Because we really do have that power and we really do have that. And that's what she means by the empowered. We are accountable for what we bring to the table, good and bad, because we can bring a lot of great things.
Yeah, I think of Proverbs 14:1, right? The wisest of women builds her house, but folly with her own hands tears it down, right? Women have so much power to make it a great home and atmosphere. And then we, in the opposite side, we also have a place to where our husbands do not enjoy being home and it's miserable for everyone. And that serves no one. And it definitely doesn't serve kingdom building. I mean, Christians should have the happiest marriages, right? Like, yeah, I think that this does really help because it puts things in a light that is very practical. And she gives, like Missy said, very blunt things like, actually, that's super disrespectful. And it's like, ooh, yeah, that could be. Yeah, I better apologize for that.
Yeah. And they're all simple skills. Like
Yes.
it's nothing that's going to take, oh, I have to totally change my personality, or
Yeah.
they're very simple and doable and something you can easily put in just in a conversation. You just have to stop for a second.
So every summer inside Convivial Circle, Stephanie runs a book club through The Empowered Wife, where she spends 6 weeks, 1 week per skill, helping everyone think through how they can be happier, more respectful wives. We highly recommend that you read this book, but it's especially helpful to read it in community. So either gather some friends around to read and discuss, or come join us in Convivial Circle this summer and make your home a happier place by having a happier marriage. And we're not done talking about this book, so be sure to stay tuned for the next episode. We have 4 total, so you don't want to miss a single one. And of course, a happy marriage always includes repenting, rejoicing, and repeating.